The Single Tracks podcast is brought to you by TPC, the Pros Closet. Spring is the perfect time to upgrade, and TPC has an industry-leading selection of new and certified pre-owned bikes, plus frames, wheels, and accessories. Each certified pre-owned bike is inspected, tested, and serviced, and every bike includes 30-day returns. Visit tpc.bike/singletracks and enter code SingleTracks40 to save $40 on every order over $200. That's the Pros Closet at tpc.bike/singletracks, and look for the link and coupon code in the show notes. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is Dr. Kristin E. Keim. Dr. Keim is a sports psychologist and a member of the U.S. Olympic Committee's Sports Psychology and Mental Training Registry. She's helped countless individual athletes and teams achieve their goals using a holistic, strength-based approach to sports psychology. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. I'm really excited.
Tell us a bit about your background. Did you have a lot of experience as an athlete that sort of led you to the field of psychology?
Yes. So, I actually think that anything with movement, again, what's the definition of athletics? The ultimate athletes, I feel like, are dancers. And if anyone has ever seen, professional Alvin Ailey or even New York City Ballet or anything, that's especially even the men dancers. I mean, that is the epitome of like almost perfection of bodies and movement.
Yeah. What was that? The 80s or the 90s that the football players were doing ballet?
Oh, well, I went to University of Georgia and we just won the championship, right? They take dance classes.
Really?
So well, and you look at, watch some of those big dudes. They are flexible, just like time trialists or mountain bikers need to be flexible. You're not, the more flexible, again, it's kind of that human conditioning. So my history was in sports psychology, because of kind of when I started dance, and I started dance like 4 years old. And then my dad was very athletic. He was, he did, in New Jersey. So, he got to play like football at the New York Giant, I don't know, somewhere. So very athletic. My mom was a dancer. So we kind of movement from the beginning was just a big part of our lives. And then some of my friends were really into tennis. And so I kind of went with them and I really enjoyed it. And so I kind of did dance at a very high level, but there was also a part of me that really enjoyed the competition aspect of sport. And so I kind of continued that and ended up doing there's junior state champion in tennis. So anything I kind of do, I kind of go all the way in, but I didn't want to just be like vanilla. I kind of like to do, maybe in hindsight, maybe I did too much because I never was like the best at one thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it, but it, kind of, especially when I worked with a therapist, it was sort of like, all right, what's kind of behind that.
Yeah.
And so then I started the first women's soccer team, had to play on the boys with Title IX to kind of get that. Wow. Yeah. So, again, if you go to my website and, want to listen to other kind of interviews I've done, I talk a little bit more extensively. I try to tell a little bit of my story on the backside. And, and basically I went to University of Georgia on a dance scholarship, kind of decided to be more focused on that part of me. And then when I graduated, that competitor side got a little bit, I don't know, just kind of was lost. And so then I started riding my bike and was like, oh, wow, I really enjoy this. I get to be outside. I don't have to be in a studio. I really enjoyed more of the community of kind of like-minded, goal-driven people who like to be healthy and, eat well. And and that was really what drew me into cycling, was just the connection with people and getting to hear their story and their journey. And then, fell in love with it, kind of got, just really enjoyed it. And some of my best experiences, and to this date, even, how we got connected, some of my lifelong best friends I met through cycling, more focus on road. I did a few cross and mountain bike just for like kicks and giggles.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a really horrible crash at the Torrejila, which I don't know if anyone has never actually experienced a crash there, because it's unfortunately very prevalent at that race, where I shattered my pelvis and had a concussion.
Ooh.
I was already getting a little kind of, again, I have this idea of like, once I get to a certain level, I want to move on. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that maybe I wasn't getting personally enough meaning and purpose from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was healing, my mom was like, you love to be the domestique. You love to help your teammates be their best. Mm-hmm. She was watching some show and she's like, there's this thing called like a sports psychologist. She's like, I could see you doing something like that. And and that was it. I kind of looked it up and got on the phone and talked to someone, and they said, one of the number one programs in the world is actually in Pleasant Hill, California at John F. Kennedy University. And within a year I moved out there, Denver, Colorado, and lived out there for 8 years. And, and I mean, that became my, I found finally, but this was, mid, late 20s, I figured out what I wanted to be. But if I hadn't gone through all the other kind of identities, I think it's actually helped me be the best, because I wasn't just a one note. I had, I'd been in many different high performance, whether that was, even the ultimate of getting your doctorate, right?
Yeah,
it's a never ending 8-year stage race is what I like to call that. So
Yeah, very cool. Well, so what are like some of the main areas where athletes face mental challenges, and particularly if we're talking about like mountain bikers?
Confidence. That's an easy answer.
Okay.
Which is the irony, because I think a lot of people think, well, you're pro, so you're confident. But I came up with a definition where it's autonomy plus efficacy equals confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people look at that, again, it's that efficacious piece. It's that autonomy. It's, the same idea that motivation is an emotion. It's not something you can have all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's good to take breaks. That's why it's good to diversify. I call it, the more cycle-centric you get, it does the opposite versus kind of spreading out and doing other hard things. Like in the off season, I call it transition season, because you don't really ever off. I always like them to take art class, do something where you have a beginner's mindset. And you have to like train that. And it is training. I mean, none of us are born perfect, and none of us are born to be, the best.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes and it shifts. And, to be your best, whether you want to be an Olympian or you just want to win, your local race, it just like, you just can't show up and hit, whatever watts. They're empty. I have athletes who are like, well, I have the numbers of Chris Froome. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not winning the Tour de France, because it's not just about the numbers. Which is another reason I love mountain biking. Sadly, again, especially with all the, devices and all that kind of stuff, it kind of would take away of that. And so it actually takes away from the confidence, because then people start to rely so much on external versus internal.
Okay.
And so that's what I've been trying to get people to get back to, is that internal confidence, whether you're riding a bike or you're just waking up and believing in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, that's it. It's kind of the idea of, putting on your face mask, right? You have to put it on yourself first before you help anyone else.
Right.
And if you don't believe in yourself, that's where it starts, right? Even if you can fake it till you make it. But that, confidence and motivation are two that I think a lot of people are surprised. But that, I would say that those are again, I've worked with people that have gone to the Olympics twice who still struggle with confidence. Now they're women. So, that also, there's a lot of other things, culture, gender, environment, your village, which is something that is really big on, like, I call it, it takes a village. It does. And that's okay. None of us can do anything alone. And if you're going to try to do it alone, you're never going to reach your full potential.
Right. Yeah. And that is interesting that you say confidence. And it sounds like it's a lack of confidence, right? Like I could also see where athletes maybe have overconfidence.
Exactly.
And doing these things like taking an art class during the off season. I mean, for me, that would bring me down a notch, right?
You need that.
It would be like,
we all need a slice of humble pie. I mean, I love the idea. Like my next kind of hashtag is do hard things. And the more you do hard things, which, I mean, I'll be honest, after struggling with severe chronic pain, rare disease for 6 years, I mean, I've done all kinds of crazy shit. I mean, I've ridden a bike for, I've ridden up the Gavia, I've done the Pyrenees. I mean, I've done some hard stuff. That stuff is easy peasy compared to anything, or even getting your doctorate, right? Yeah. I mean, but in hindsight, I know that has helped my confidence to the point where I have to remind myself what it's like not to be confident anymore, which sounds kind of an ego, right?
Yeah,
but there is healthy ego, ego, again, it's all about words and our language. And the most powerful language is our internal dialogue. And yes, there's a difference between healthy ego, healthy internal dialogue, and negative, but most people are not over. Most people, male and female, doesn't matter, are under.
Interesting. Well, how common is it for athletes to incorporate like mental skills training and working with a sports psychologist? No.
Not enough. Oh, by no means. I mean, that's what really, again, it's not about me, but it's about us. And so, I have people that reach out to me and I'll realize, I'm like, well, that's great. You're working with me, but we really got to dial in your training, or your coach recommended you, but this relationship ain't working anymore. Right. Or they need to work on the nutrition piece, which, I mean, racing with hangry or bonking is legitimate. I mean, I've been there, I've done it. I mean, I understand that. Overtraining is massive, as well. Are you training to train? Or are you training to compete? Very different. Again, it kind of goes back to that. Why are you doing something? And why do you want to be your best? Whether that's, competition or school or just being a good person or a good friend, is getting back to our why, which, I think that changes. So I think, again, every year it's important to look at your goals. I call them objectives. Again, language, we talk about resolutions and goals. And I think people just don't understand like how powerful that is to write it down and to be accountable, not only to yourself, but to your village as well. But very underutilized, the mental side. I mean, even in 2023, if everyone, my goal as a culture, especially as Americans, is just like when you get insurance, right? Everyone has a PCP. You may not go to them all the time. We need to have an environment where everyone, because, I mean, people don't know, but it is staggering how many people I work with, pro, not pro, who have contemplated suicide, struggle with eating disorders. But I tell people, in an enduring way, because I have mental health challenges. I've suffered from depression. There's alcoholism. There's suicide in my family. It's highly genetic. But also that's what makes me who I am in a positive way, because you're a little cray-cray if you want to go ride your bike for 6 hours. Most people just want to sit on the couch and eat potato chips, right?
Yeah, much easier.
So you learn about that as your strength and harness it and use it as an asset. But just like you need a coach, or you need to read something about coaching, you just can't go ride your bike all day long, right? That is still something, especially in American culture, that is seen as a weakness, and it needs to be seen as a strength and as an asset that you need help with, and that's not a weakness. That just shows, like I tell people, when they reach out to me, that shows me that they're a strong human being, is that when they ask for help. Versus what people think, that asking for help is a sign of weakness. It's actually your greatest strength and your first step to mentally being what you need to be your best, whether your best is winning a bike race or just being a really kind human being in general.
Yeah. I think that's a really important message for sure. So one of the things I've been thinking about lately is this idea of mental toughness. And I think it's a concept a lot of mountain bikers can relate to, even if we're not necessarily like competitive athletes. So I want to know if you have any tips for helping people get through like a really tough workout, or even just like a really tough part of a ride that, you're just out on a Saturday and you're having a tough time. Like what kind of tricks or tips can people use for that?
Well, first thing, I'm not a big fan of the idea of, and it's nothing against you because I say this on every interview.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what mental strength is or mental toughness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we try to put it in those terms, I guess, because we're athletes, right? Like, yeah, we know how to work our muscles, is the brain the same or not?
Exactly. And that's why I challenge people, because again, what is mental toughness to me is my client who is, because, when you have a mental health issue, you got to look at it as a chronic disease. People are never cured of an eating disorder. It's a mental disease. Again, it's not a character flaw. There's no, who the hell would want to be depressed and really take their life if they weren't sick? The same with eating disorders. Who wants to be controlled? And again, there's everyone's journey is different. We still have a lot to learn about the brain, and we have a lot to understand about mental health in general. But that's mental strength, is that versus completing a workout. Not to, like, again, apples and oranges. I just don't see them in the same. So when people think about their strengths mentally, that goes back to your why. Again, okay, so your coach has you do 5 by whatevers. It's the same thing with like those dumb tests. If an athlete is paralyzed by doing a test, why do it? It's not proving anything. Yeah. It's actually probably taking away from their confidence, right? And they're using up so much energy and negativity that that's what holds people back versus what's their favorite workout. Now, yeah, you need to do some challenging things, but again, it's just that why and not being cookie cutter. So none of us are alike. And that's why I really challenge athletes to, you can't have free coaching. You can't have free mental health. Like it's a service. It's a business. But again, it can be something that empowers you to be great, not only in your sport. So when you're thinking at what's mentally tough, what does that mean for you? So, okay. So if you want to be able to get through a hard workout, and that is going to be something that is hard for you and you want to get better at, then that's awesome, right? But if you keep having it like every year, it's taking you 5 steps backwards, and, we're working on things. And I mean, again, it's the why. Like, is it really going to make a difference? If your coach can't come up with your power numbers, not all that, then that coach needs to go to school or something, right? Like, I didn't have any of that. I trained off of perceived exertion. Which I think everyone needs to learn that. It's the same thing. It's great. Get some external motivation. When's the last time you raced with, a podcast though, right? Yeah. When's the last time you heard your breathing? That's not bad. If you're huffing and puffing up a climb that you never hear the huffing and puffing, then it's going to become a bad negative thing when you're racing because you're not used to that, right? Yeah. I want athletes. I'm not against the numbers, but do you know what it feels like to ride your bike at whatever watts? What is that internal dialogue? What is it? What does it feel like in your muscles, in your lungs, and reconnecting with kind of that, again, the body and the mind, and it's all related. And so that's what I kind of look at when again, it goes back to how do we describe it? Yeah. What is the definition of mental strength? Which I like that a lot better. What is your definition of physical strength? And then, what are you doing to get better physically? But what are you doing to get better with your skills? What are you actually doing to get better mentally? Because you're not going to just get better because you want to. It takes work. It does. Yeah. And it's underappreciated, undervalued. I'm not the best fit for everyone, but, even just reading an article or picking up a book, you can gain so much by even just internalizing that you want to get better at something. Even just that right there can cognitively flip a switch into us to get closer to our full potential.
Yeah. And I guess I'm thinking too, I'm glad you kind of provided that definition of mental strength and how that works. I mean, I guess I'm thinking more just like situational, like, I'm in the middle of the ride and I'm on a really tough climb and I just want to stop. Like, I just want to give up.
Yeah.
And I know I've got, miles to go and like, I'm never going to make it to the top.
Well, because you just did a perfect example. Future thinking is anxiety. Past thinking is present. This is the whole woo-woo, shaboodaloo of meditation and mindfulness, which I love, but again, it gets saturated because people don't understand what it is. Mindfulness is just being in the moment. Now, who would choose to be anxious or depressed, right?
Yeah.
So if you aren't worried about what it's going to feel like in the future, and you're just focusing on where you're at right now with very clear objectives. Okay, so your coach has you do this interval today. Why? How many athletes actually understand why they are doing a workout? This drives me crazy, right? Like, and if your coach can't tell you why you're doing something, please fire the coach, right? Like, that is a big red flag for me. I have people who become their best coaching themselves, right? Because they have me. I could be a coach. I'm probably better than most coaches. I don't choose to do that, but we definitely talk about it. Just like I'm going to talk about your mental stress. It's all related. What are you putting in your body? How are you sleeping? Right? What is your job like? What is your family like? I have to help a lot of athletes, unfortunately, go through depressions. Sometimes they have to face that they're depressed and learn how to be depressed. Sometimes you have to go through the fire to get to the other side. Divorce. I mean, sadly, I've had many people have to get divorces, but it's because, again, we all evolve and change. And the more you work on yourself, the more you may realize, that there's family or partners where you've just grown apart. They don't support your goals and your dreams. And, our environment shapes us, bio, psycho, social, right? And so that's kind of where we start, right? Okay, so when you're doing these workouts, the why are you doing this? And the more you have a why with specific mental and physical kind of reasoning, and understanding and excitement, like you get to go train, you get to go ride your bike versus, I've got to go do this. Even if it's going to hurt. If you can't have this, I get to, and pain becomes your friend, well, then I don't know why you're riding a bike or racing a bicycle, because you're never, again, you're not trying to train to be healthy. You're training to be a competitor. And I'm not here to help people with exercise psychology. I'm here to help with performance psychology. There's a difference there too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think I find myself kind of in that situation where, if living in the present moment and like just focusing on like how you're feeling right now and not worrying about how you're going to feel.
Exactly. It still be uncomfortable, but again, it's not paralyzing uncomfortableness. It's an excitement. It's I need, you train hard and you race harder, but how many, I'd say 90% of athletes hit their best numbers in their training and not in their racing. And I don't, especially for mountain biking when it's basically a personal time trial, right? I can kind of get it with road or cross because it's dictated by others. But unless you're racing, Yolanda or someone who's really that much more talented. But again, they're talented because she knows how to ride a bike. She doesn't have to rely on just climbing as a mountain biker because she can school half the men and women, or all women, and have even, faster time splits than the pro men. Yeah. Because she works every day on any challenge areas. And evolves. And I feel like we get so wrapped up on numbers that we forget about the bigger picture and the specificity that's needed. So, and it's different for everyone. Again, I think, that's the cool part of working with me is that especially when we first get to know each other and we're first working, is that sometimes we need someone who doesn't have any biases in our village. And that's why I think it's healthy if someone really likes their coach, but they've been working with the same person for a while, well, then it's the coach's job to spice it up, right? Like, do they need to go take another class? Do they need to come up with some new workouts? Do they need to propose that you go, I mean, the best thing that any athlete could ever do, mountain bike included, even though it is more of an American sport, is move. I mean, the first thing, if you want to be the world's best, is you have to move to Europe. I mean, and if you don't, then you're only going to be subpar. Because again, it's the environment, it's the culture, it's the terrain, right? We just don't have anything in America that's going to be like what you're racing in Lenzerheide or, all these other, I work with downhill mountain bikers. And even if you live in, North Carolina, it's still not going to be the same as, racing any of those downhills in Ireland or Scotland.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I want to talk about developing a winning mindset. I believe you use that sort of language on your website.
That is a winning mindset is, that's kind of that language of, again, what is winning?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's, I get people say, because like, I'll describe it as something, but what does it mean to you? Like, what first comes to mind when we hear language? And again, it all gets back to that internal dialogue.
Right. Well, so for me, in terms of sports, like what comes to mind is this idea of like positive visualization. Is that part of it? Is that like kind of the current thinking on it?
Oh, God,
or is there something more to developing a winning mindset, especially when it comes to mountain biking?
Well, and you already do it. I mean, you wouldn't even finish a race if you didn't do visualization. So that's what people don't understand. Like, I didn't understand it because as a dancer, you're already like, I wouldn't be doing, 20 fouettes if I didn't already see myself doing them. Right. I didn't understand it as a tool because it is so enriched, because it is so correcting yourself. It's very humbling dance because you get yelled at from age 4 on. I mean, yeah, it is, discipline to the nth degree, right? Which is great. That's why I think it's, as long as it's not creating, eating disorders or body image, which I actually see that way more in cycling than I ever did in dance. And in male populations, because we have a huge issue with binge eating disorder in America, and especially mountain biking. And, just the language of, body image and that you have to be a certain size and a certain weight. That's that is it. That's the entry gateway, unfortunately, to eating disorders and as a culture, and especially in the evolution of sport. And that all ties back to image and visualization. And one of my favorite projects was actually doing a huge research paper on, imagery, visualization. And I always tell people, I love when we went to Olympics. I had some mountain bikers and I had road cyclists and triathletes competing. My sister and I went and saw synchronized swimming, and it was fascinating because my history of working in clinical psych was also, my dissertation was on mild traumatic brain injuries, aka concussions, in female athletes. And I was thinking, oh wow, like they must have, how do they train? Because they can't sit there and be doing these amazing dives all the time. That has to be doing centrifugal force damage. They spend more time lying down on their backs flat next to each other, visualizing their synchronized dives.
Interesting.
If you take a string, everyone can try this at home, you put a bead on the end, you look at the string, you hold it by 2 little fingers, and you visualize it starting to move, it will move.
Oh, wow.
I'm not kidding you. I'm
it's
all
like a
into
Ouija
woo-woo
board
stuff, but yes. But that's the power of our mind, and that's the power of it being our kryptonite, which it is for most human beings, versus our game changer and a weapon and our superpower.
Well, is it like as simple though as like imagining yourself like on the top step of the podium? Like, is that what we're talking about? Or is it like imagining your every pedal stroke, or like what's kind of the level of detail, or like give us an example of?
That's where it's important where to work on someone. It needs to be a script. It's just like an actor, or a musician having to, the better they understand their instrument, but the more they play the guitar or the,
Mm-hmm.
the accompaniment. I think the first thing is figuring out, are you watching it like a movie or are you behind the handlebars? And sometimes you get mix it up,
Yeah.
but we all kind of do it. So I think it's again, kind of, what is that internal dialogue? How do you visualize? And there is no right or wrong. I take what you do innately, but it has to become an actual tool and a training.
Okay.
And I don't think people understand that. Just like words are powerful, I have a lot of people that use what we call them cue words or quotes. I mean, I have one athlete I've been working with for years, and we have like this long text of all these photos of famous quotes. And that's what has helped them. And so when they're in a hard place, they, I have one, it's funny because she wasn't very aggressive. And so as a joke, we started saying like, we put KB on the back of her number, and people didn't understand what it was. She did. It means kill bitches, which is hilarious because it was the opposite of how this person is. But it's just like, I have road cyclists that would warm up to the most nastiest rap music ever because it became like this alter kind of ego of putting on someone else's skin. But they would visualize that person and that performance. And so I think that's, again, being an athlete as putting on a costume. People complain. I hate it when movie stars complain because I'm like, well, this is what you signed up for. It's an entertainment. So is sport at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's an entertainment. If you didn't have fans or sponsors, you wouldn't have bike races. If you didn't have bike races, you wouldn't be racing.
Yeah.
And so, but it all does tie back to that visualization of see what you believe and believe what you see. And that's why it's good to have role models. It's good to, who's your favorite athletes? It doesn't have to be cyclists, right? Who inspires you? It's so awesome to have a bunch of U23 guys. I was giving a talk and all they ever did was mention, Kate Courtney and Aaron Huck and all these women.
Yeah.
As the people they looked up to.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
I just thought that was awesome because it's like, they're if anything, they train harder and smarter because, again, they understand that it takes a village. They understand that they want to work on their mental health. And yes, culturally, it's not that women have more issues. It's that we have allowed women to feel like they can ask for help. And now the next step is to let men and males understand that, they can be their best too by asking for help and working on visualizations or their internal dialogue and letting it be more accepted, which is, it's something we need to work on bigger scheme. Because again, it's not equitable that there's more. It really doesn't matter about the gender. It has more to do with the human being and that person.
Yeah, that's a great message. One of the other topics I want to talk about is motivation. And for me, again, like the context that I think about this is like, the days when I'm like, I feel like I should go for a ride, but I don't want to for whatever reason. So it could be a training ride or it could be just general fitness. So how should people look at that, and how should we kind of think about that in terms of staying motivated?
It is an emotion. So the minute your brain goes coulda, shoulda, wouldas, then most likely less is more. Don't train. I always say, unless that you're, tired. Again, the athlete knows themselves. I rarely have anyone that's under, and if people are under training, they're probably depressed and don't need to be training or racing.
Yeah.
Honestly, right? Most people overtrain and are overdoing it. And so it's an idea of, I rarely have people that aren't, and if they are kind of coulda, shoulda, wouldas, it's usually because they're depressed and they're overtrained. First step, like, it is legitimate, especially in endurance sport. I would say, to be very honest, it's gotten better because I've been working with enough athletes where now, there's no reason for women to go ride their bike for 5 hours when their race is or an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't make any sense. Now, I get it from the stand, because I know there's going to be coaches that just hear that and think, very black and white. I'm like, no, I get that they've got to be able to get their endurance up, but there is that phase to when they're, been racing for 10 years and they're 30 years old. There's no reason. I mean, my best athletes that went to the Olympics, won a Giro, all that stuff, they have never trained over 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because their races weren't even ever, and if they were, it's the same thing. I ran marathons. I never ran an actual marathon before I ran the marathon. And I almost,
Good point.
made it to Boston, because you don't have to. And I think that's it, is that the magic gets used up in training, and then that takes away from your motivation, because your brain doesn't differentiate between, I was taking a week of exams, right? It's like, okay, if you have exam week, there's no training. Like, you go ride for fun, go do a coffee shop ride, or don't ride even.
Yeah.
I hate coffee shop rides. It's like,
Yeah.
again, is that really what you need? Or do you just need a day to sleep in and sit on your ass and study all day, right? Maybe that's what you need.
Well, it's interesting, because you're saying the opposite thing, that people are overtrained. And I think, for a lot of us, we do say that, we're like, I don't want to go out for a ride. And then we go do it, and we're like, actually, I felt good. Like, I'm glad I did. And so, like, are we wrong though? Should we listen to ourselves more when our brain is telling us, you shouldn't go for a ride today, or you shouldn't do a hard one?
Yep. Well, again, if your job is to be a pro athlete, your happy place cannot be riding a bike. End of story.
Yeah. That's kind of sad.
My athletes that were their best, but that is really what I have to teach people. It's my best athletes don't ride bikes really anymore. They do love to ride, because you're never going to be your best if you don't enjoy it, but their whole life isn't cycle-centric.
Okay.
They're not going to get over depression by riding their bike. They're going to get over depression by going trail running, walking their dog, taking a yoga class, riding, watching a movie. I mean, my big escape is movie. I love books. I need an escape. I need something that is not going to be dictated, because again, your brain gets addicted. I mean, it really does, to movement and exercise and that euphoria. But again, if you're always using up that bucket, then when you get to a race, your brain's going to be like, well, we just did 40 hours of training. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. And then you don't have a good race. And then what does everyone think? Oh, I need to train more. I need to train harder. It's like, no, maybe you just need to train less and smarter.
Yeah.
But again, everyone's different. So if you need a mental health break, it's not as much about riding as much as it is sunshine and movement. No one's going to feel much better about riding their trainer in a cold, freezing dungeon, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you might feel a little bit better, but that's not why most of us that's why, I never trained on the trainer. I hated the trainer. I would rather go run in the snow in Boulder than ride a trainer.
Right.
But that was me. And I had my best seasons. But when I tried to succumb to the trainer, I actually got burned out. And then it led to overuse injuries and plagued by injuries. And finally, it was great education, because I think, the stuff that you're not going to learn in a book, you have to go through. So, yes, I want you to go out there and ride with other people and feel better. And maybe you go out there for 20 minutes, but if you're doing 20 minutes and you're feeling like you're empty, you're hollow, you're stressed, it's not helping, turn around and go home. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not worth it. Tomorrow, you could be crushing it and set your best numbers. That's what we want. We want the magic to be in the races, but you don't want to burn up all the magic because you got so rigid with comparing of what others are doing, right? You and your coach have to figure out what makes you click, what makes you your best. And, for me, that's what's exciting. That journey, because if you don't question it and you don't figure out what stokes your motivation, because it is a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And then that it is the basis of confidence as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to get back to confidence, because you mentioned that's one of the main challenges that a lot of athletes face. And in mountain biking specifically, I think a lot of us, we tend to lose confidence after a crash. So what's a good way to get back after a crash? How do you start to build that confidence back up?
Well, performance and injury, unfortunately, is a reason a lot of people start working with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always tell people, like, the minute you get injured is, again, it is almost like a blessing in disguise for you to hit ground zero and start back. Like, I always, whenever I get sick or injured, I always see it as a positive, because then I get to go back and work on the basics and the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I teach people. It's like, all right, well, for me to get really good at descending, I actually learned how to ride on the wheel of pro mountain bikers down, really scary road mount like bikes, on a road. But I learned to look out. No one teaches you that. You kind of have to just do it by osmosis of learning how to do it. And every time I would have an injury, I would have, I'd have some issues riding close to people, because I'm human. And, I have so many road cyclists who have great numbers and they're good athletes, but they don't know how to race in a peloton. They don't take the time to work on that. It's a skill set. We're not all Dutch. We're not all, born with a loose screw and can just bomb ourselves down, especially Americans, because you weren't 3 years old, learning how to ski down the Alps or something, right? Yeah. So it's something you can learn and get better at, but you have to work at it. You have to condition. And so the minute you get injured, you already need to be able not to see it as like, I'm going to be bad at something, but say, okay, now I get to really rest and I get to work on those challenge areas. And I would say every athlete, especially mountain bikers, needs to work at descending and skills, because you are not a climber if you get to the top and you don't know how to get back down. And utilize and learning how to use your energy. Again, okay, yeah, you were the first to the top and you're so cross-eyed that you're going to be worth nothing on the other side, versus having the patience and the confidence in your ability to ride your own race and climb your own climb, knowing that you're going to be able to pass them on the descent or pass them through the feed zone or, whatever. When that ties back to, again, confidence, knowing your plan, having a strategy, visualizing yourself doing these very specific objectives.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Well, so that idea of like this holistic approach to sports psychology, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering, is happiness connected to athletic performance? Like, is there a correlation?
Oh, God, yeah. Well, that's why, as a joke, one of my first clients, I would say, happy racers go faster. And he said, Dr. Keim, there's this thing called hashtags. He says, that needs to be your hashtag. And so if you go to my website, my t-shirts, it's, do hard things is my new one. It takes a village. Happy racers, go on, put hashtag happy racers go faster, and it'll come up with probably every athlete I've ever worked with.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And my Instagram and my, whatever. But it is true. It's not just some colloquial thing. Think about it. It's not just happy human. It's the human side of sport is my other thing. If you're a happy human, then you're going to be a happy athlete. You can't be a happy athlete unless you're a happy human. And athletes are human. They have issues. They have problems. They have mental health challenges. They have relationship challenges. They have identity challenges. They have, work challenges. But it's being able to face those challenges, admit them, and work on them that help us evolve, because none of us are perfect. And it's about progression, not perfection, but progression.
Yeah.
And yes, happiness is it. And, again, what is happiness? What makes me happy? Not being in chronic pain anymore. I don't ever care if I don't ever ride a bike again. I don't care if I don't ever get married, have kids, right? Like, because that's what brings joy and meaning and worthiness and purpose. You know what brings me meaning and purpose, and I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids, is I get to be a therapist. I get to help people achieve their dreams. And I can't think of any more privileged thing that I'll ever do for the rest of my life.
That's great. It's interesting because you see people like on the podium after a race, like the winners, and obviously they always look very happy, but I wonder, how many of them are the top racers? Are they the happiest ones? Or, I mean, it's obviously not 1-to-1.
Well, but then that's the other side is, we call it when the stars align, it's the individual zone of optimal function. Think about the last race you did well. Most people can't remember what happened, but you will forever remember that bad race.
Yeah.
But that's being in the moment. You're so in the moment that you don't remember. That's what you want. You want to be so in the moment you're not thinking. And that's kind of that, which is kind of a bummer, right? But I think that's just kind of what you have to understand, is that to be present, you may not remember perfectly what happened, but you do remember the journey. And so again, that's not a cliche, that it's about the journey, and it's about surrounding yourself with people that inspire you, that you can inspire, that bring out the best in you, and that help you transcend and find your own voice and your own magic and your own joy and your own happiness. And, and it doesn't have to, you can be your best and actually enjoy. And all my athletes, when they retire, it wasn't the winning the Giro. It wasn't, going to the Olympics. Favorite race was when they first got their top 10 or something, right? Like, it's not winning. The win was beating their future husband up a climb. And then later on, this amazing human being sadly dies of cancer. But this athlete would never have been where they are without this human being falling into their life.
Yeah.
And and their marriage to this day is probably one of the most beautiful stories and privileges. I mean, and both of them became lifelong friends of mine forever. And and we went through some hard shit, because it, whether you want to become a doctor or an actor or an actress or a pro athlete, anything that you want to be the best at is going to be hard and uncomfortable. But it's through that is the only way that you're going to be your best. It is, but that's, and the only way you're going to make it through is by having a supportive village where you believe in yourself and you believe in the people around you. And most days you want to be out there, and the bike and racing brings you joy, and you're doing it for the right reasons, not just because you have to or you should. It's because you want to and you get to.
Yeah. It's all connected. Well, the last question I want to ask you about, you obviously have been a competitive athlete pretty much your whole life. And I'm curious, based on all that experience, and then also just what you have learned and know about sports psychology, do you get nervous before races or competitions?
Oh my God, dude, I am a nervous wreck. I can't even watch. Like, I never watched the end of my races. I mean, I was at Worlds when Megan got third place, and I missed the whole race. Like, I literally was sitting there running around like a mom. I was at Worlds when Kate Courtney won, and I couldn't watch. Like, I couldn't watch. I was like, oh my God, I can't watch. I'm like running around screaming. Like, but because I care. And again, I may not be the best fit for everyone, but if any athletes please reach out. Again, like, I am taking new clients. It is a privilege. Even if I'm not a good fit, I will help you find what you need. But again, like, I guess to toot my own horn is that I have gone through really hard shit. That is stuff you just do not learn how to do. And I've started my own business. I help with career counseling. I love college students. I love, I'm a feminist, but half my clients are men. Right? Like, that's it. Like, I again, I love what I do. I'm passionate. I don't work with just endurance athletes. I love basketball. I love sports. I love dance. I work with musicians. I work with actors. I mean, if I could do anything right now, I'd probably want to become a theater or film star or get back to dance, right? But then I just rode my recumbent bike, and the whole time I'm riding it, I'm sitting there thinking, all right, now I'm going to turn it up. And, I just get back to that athlete, right? I couldn't even walk a month ago, basically.
Oh my goodness.
And now, I'm on an interview and I'm working with clients, and I have to remind myself, oh my God, Kristin, like, you could barely even talk. You didn't even know where you were. I couldn't even tell you what year it was. I had a birthday in the hospital and didn't even realize I'd turned, 43, right? So,
wow.
But that's it. I have 43 years of overcoming, not only for myself, but I have had the opportunity and the privilege to work with some of the most amazing human beings, whether it's to win worlds, which I have many world champions across different sports, to just, again, I love working with people that just want to finish their first mountain bike race, or even just get healthier with their body, and their mindset. So, you don't have to be pro, and you don't have to be pro to feel like you need to work on your performance with a sports psychologist or just a therapist, because at the end of the day, if you're having mental health challenges, you don't need to be training and competing. You got to work on that first. And that's, I have a lot of athletes where I'm like, all right, if we don't get this eating disorder under control, you're not competing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that can be a powerful motivator for them to work on themselves, because they want to get back to it. But you've got to be physically and mentally healthy, because think about it. I mean, again, who wants to be at a start line, right? Like, every day. I mean, I couldn't pay me to go compete again. I mean, I'm like, no, I live vicariously through all my little athletes now.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Don't need that stress anymore.
Yeah. Well, clearly you're passionate, and really appreciate you taking the time to help us understand sports psychology and mental health, especially.
Oh, anytime. I love it. Like I said, I could talk about it all day long. And, people are like, you need to, do your own podcast or write your book. And I've learned, I'm like, that's great. But right now I'm too busy actually working with humans. One day I may not be able to do that. So, those are definitely goals that I'd have. But, I think about some of the most famous authors didn't write their first book till they're in their 60s or 70s. And I said, I don't have enough stories. I don't have enough experience, because life is your ultimate, degree or class. So I need, especially as a therapist, I'm excited to see where I'll be in 10 years.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we're excited to see that as well. Well, listeners can connect with Dr. Keim and find out about the services she offers through Keim Performance Consulting at keimperformanceconsulting.com. And we'll have that link in the show notes. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.